Okay, so uh are we ready to dive into this one? I think we are. In Home Alone, this is a classic, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a holiday movie that, keeps coming back year after year.
I mean, you gave me this really interesting set of sources for this deep dive, right? We've got the IMDb page for the movie, which, gives us all the nitty-gritty details about, the production, who directed it, box office numbers, that
Well, the
kind of.
facts and figures behind the phenomena.
Exactly. And then you also gave me this whole stack of user reviews,
No,
which,
those are always fun.
oh, they're all over the map. Some people love this movie, some people really don't.
Strong opinions for sure.
Yeah. So I think our mission today is to, I guess, figure out what made this movie such a phenomenon.
Yeah, try to unpack it a bit.
Exactly. Like, what is it about Home Alone that keeps people talking? Why does it have this staying power? Is it just a fun Christmas movie? Or is there something, a little bit deeper going on?
Right, right. Because it was a huge hit. I mean, box office smash back in 1990. I mean, this is, a while ago. But uh, directed by Chris Columbus,
Right.
written by John Hughes, the legend himself, and became the highest grossing live-action comedy, I think, of all time at that point.
Yeah, the IMDb page says it made almost $500 million worldwide.
Worldwide.
That's wild.
Yeah, it's a lot of people wanted to see a kid get left behind at Christmas.
So what is it? What's the secret sauce?
Well, I think part of it, is that it taps into this kind of these childhood fantasies that we all have.
Yeah.
Not just the sort of surface level stuff like, oh, it'd be fun to be home alone and eat junk food.
Yeah, like no parents, no rules.
Exactly. But it goes a little deeper than that.
Okay, so beyond the junk food and the freedom,
Yeah.
what else is there?
Well, I think, for kids especially, there's this real appeal to the idea of being competent,
Right.
of being in control, right? So Kevin's not just surviving home alone, he's thriving.
He's got everything under control.
He's taking charge. He's outsmarting the adults. He's ultimately the one protecting his home. And that fantasy of power, especially for a kid, I think is incredibly appealing.
It's almost like he's building his own little kingdom, right? He's got the traps, the rules, he's all his.
Exactly. And, let's not forget, this is a John Hughes creation.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
The guy, I mean, his movies always have this blend of humor and heart,
Mm-hmm.
and this real understanding of kind of what it feels like to be an outsider.
So you're saying even amidst the slapstick and the craziness, those classic John Hughes elements are still there?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's a big part of why it works on multiple levels, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You've got the goofy, over-the-top comedy with the Wet Bandits, Harry and Marv.
Iconic.
But then you've also got those quieter moments, like Kevin's relationship with Old Man Marley.
That's true, yeah. It's like you think he's this scary figure at first, but then it turns out he helps Kevin, and then we learn about his own story and his regrets. And it's really kind of touching.
And that's what Hughes does so well, right?
Yeah.
He can make you laugh one minute, then tug at your heartstrings the next.
Yeah. Now, speaking of performances, we got to talk about Macaulay Culkin, right? I mean, it's funny reading these reviews. Some people just adore him as Kevin. Others find him completely annoying.
I know, right? He's definitely a point of, I think, contention. And it's interesting because, he really walks that line between kind of mischievous and vulnerable.
Right.
And some people say, oh, he's just doing these wide-eyed expressions. But others see something, something really genuine underneath that.
Yeah, I mean, it makes me wonder, too, how much of it was genuine acting versus just sort of, being a charismatic kid. It's hard to separate the two, right?
And especially when you think about, his career later on.
Yeah.
It does make you wonder about kind of the pressure of that level of fame so young.
Yeah.
Was Home Alone, did it set him up for success, or was it ultimately kind of more of a burden?
It's a really interesting question. Maybe we can circle back to that a little later. But for now, we have to address the elephant in the room, or should I say the pink can in the face? Because we got to talk about the violence, right? The booby trap.
Ah, yes, the infamous booby traps.
I mean, it's cartoonish, it's over the top, paint cans swinging, nails in the foot, all that stuff.
It's a very particular brand of violence, I guess.
Yeah, and it's interesting because some reviewers absolutely love it. They think it's hilarious, and others find it, maybe a little problematic.
Right.
And it makes me wonder, how does Home Alone's brand of violence kind of compare to other family movies of that era?
That's a good question.
Was it really that extreme for its time?
Well, I mean, part of what makes it stand out is just the sheer inventiveness of it all, right? It's like Kevin's using these everyday household items as weapons.
Right. It's like he's turning his home into this giant, Rube Goldberg machine of pain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And of course, it's all played for laughs.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the key thing here.
Yeah.
I mean, it's playing with that, primal desire for revenge,
Yeah.
for seeing the bad guys get their comeuppance. And, even though obviously Harry and Marv are the villains,
Right.
there's still a part of us that can't help but laugh when they get,
Yeah, when they get what's coming to them.
Exactly.
It's like, it's like those old silent comedies where someone gets a pie in the face.
Yeah.
It's silly, it's exaggerated.
Right.
But there's something kind of, universal about it.
I think it's a safe way to explore those
Yeah.
darker impulses we all have.
Right.
That desire to see someone get their just desserts,
Yeah.
but in a way that's, funny and not actually harmful.
Yeah, and Home Alone takes it to a whole other level with those booby traps. I mean, it's almost like a ballet of, slapstick violence.
It is. It's very, very creative and elaborate.
But, it's funny because for me, I have to say some of the humor feels a little, I don't know, cringy now.
Mm-hmm.
Like the scene where Marv steps on the nail.
Yeah.
It's played for laughs, obviously, but there's this lingering shot of his foot, and it's like, ooh, that's a little too much.
Yeah.
Do you think that kind of humor has aged well?
That's a good question. I think our tolerance for that kind of sort of pain-based humor has maybe shifted a little bit.
Yeah.
What might have been hilarious in 1990 might feel, excessive or even kind of mean-spirited today.
Right, right. It really makes you wonder how this movie would be received if it came out today.
I think it would definitely spark some conversations and some debates.
Oh, for sure.
But, we should also remember that underneath all the slapstick and the booby traps, Home Alone also has a lot of heart.
That's true. I mean, it's easy to get caught up in all the, the comedic elements, but there's that core message about family.
Yeah.
About appreciating the people you love, even when they, drive you crazy.
Especially during the holidays, right? That theme of reconciliation, of coming together despite the chaos, I think that's a big part of why it continues to resonate.
Yeah. There's that moment when Kevin realizes he actually misses his family. Even, the annoying parts.
Yeah, he kind of comes full circle.
Exactly. And then there's his whole arc of facing his fears, right? Like, he starts out terrified of the basement, and by the end, he's defending his home from burglars.
It's a classic hero's journey, in a way.
It is, yeah. Okay, so we've talked about the humor, the heartwarming stuff, but what about the actual, craft of the film? The IMDb page mentions that Home Alone was a real passion project for John Hughes.
Oh, yeah, he was very involved.
He even wrote the script in like 9 days.
9 days. That's incredible.
It's amazing. And you can definitely see his, his signature style all over this movie.
The dialogue, the warmth, the use of music.
Oh, yeah, the music. So good.
It's instantly recognizable.
Instantly. It just transports you right back to that, that time period. I think one thing that really sets Home Alone apart from other holiday movies is that sense of, wish fulfillment.
Yeah.
And I don't just mean the, the being home alone part, but also like the idea of getting to be resourceful, inventive, almost like a kid version of MacGyver.
Yeah, like he's problem solving, he's coming up with these creative solutions.
He's got it all figured out.
Exactly. There's something really satisfying about watching Kevin sort of take control of his environment and use his ingenuity to outsmart the adults.
Right. Which makes me wonder how much of this movie's staying power is just pure nostalgia. For people who grew up watching it, it must, bring back so many memories.
Oh, for sure. Nostalgia plays a big role. But I think there's something more to it than that.
Yeah.
It captures a certain kind of, childhood energy and wonder that I think can transcend generations.
Right.
Even kids today can relate to that sense of adventure, that desire to prove yourself.
I hear that, but wouldn't you say that some elements of the movie might not resonate as strongly with, younger audiences today?
In what way?
Like the whole premise of a kid being left home alone for days, it seems a little far-fetched now.
Oh, interesting.
In the age of, smartphones and constant communication.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, the movie definitely relies on this kind of suspension of disbelief.
Right.
That was maybe easier to buy back in the 90s.
Exactly.
Today, it's harder to imagine Kevin not just, calling his parents or texting his friends or something.
Right. The isolation, which was so crucial to the original movie, it would be hard to replicate that today.
It would.
Which brings us back to that whole remake idea. How would you update Home Alone for a modern audience? What would that even look like?
You'd have to find a new kind of threat, right? Something that resonates with today's anxieties.
Right.
Instead of burglars, maybe it's like, a group of hackers trying to steal the family's digital identities or something.
I like that. So Kevin would have to use his tech skills to outsmart them.
Exactly. Like he's coding, building firewalls, setting up, virtual diversions.
Digital booby traps.
Yes. It could be a whole new level of ingenuity.
And instead of John Candy's polka band showing up to save the day,
Yeah.
maybe it's a road delivery drone?
Oh, I like that.
Accidentally helps Kevin foil the hackers.
Now that's a visual.
It really is. It's funny how one movie can spark so many ideas, but it also makes you realize how much our world has changed.
It has.
And how those changes would inevitably impact a story like Home Alone.
Absolutely. And it raises some interesting questions about, how we even define home and alone in today's world.
Right, because back then being home alone meant, being physically isolated.
Right.
But now it can mean something totally different.
It can.
So we've covered a lot of ground, the humor, the heart, the cultural impact, even the potential for a remake. But I think we need to kind of circle back to the question we posed at the beginning. Is Home Alone truly a holiday classic?
It's a tough one.
It is, right.
Because on the one hand, it's definitely a product of its time. There are some elements that maybe haven't aged particularly well.
Sure.
But on the other hand, it has this undeniable appeal that goes beyond just, nostalgia.
It's true. I mean, it's become part of our kind of cultural lexicon. People instantly recognize it.
It's iconic.
And that's no small feat.
No, it's not.
It takes a special kind of movie to achieve that.
It does.
I think what makes it so interesting is that it manages to be both silly and heartwarming.
Yeah.
Chaotic and comforting, all at the same time.
It does juggle a lot of tones.
It does. And maybe that's the secret to its appeal, It allows us to tap into that kind of childlike sense of wonder, even as we acknowledge, the complexities of family and the world around us.
Beautifully said.
Aw, shucks.
But ultimately, I think it does come down to personal preference.
Right.
Some people will always adore Home Alone.
Yeah.
And others will just find it grating and outdated.
Yeah.
But there's no denying that it's had a huge impact on popular culture.
Okay, so maybe instead of trying to, definitively answer the classic question, we can leave our listeners with something to ponder.
Okay, I like that.
You've given us all these reviews, and we've, explored all the different facets of this movie, its strengths, its weaknesses. So what do you think? What's the big question?
Well, I think the most interesting question is this. If you were to introduce Home Alone to someone who'd never seen it before,
Okay.
what would you say?
Oh, that's good.
How would you describe its magic, its flaws, and its appeal?
That is a great question. I guess that's the ultimate test, right? To really articulate what makes a movie special, even if it doesn't perfectly align with, our current sensibilities. And that's what I love about these deep dives. We get to revisit these movies, these cultural touchstones, and really kind of see them with fresh eyes.
It's like having a conversation with the past, right? Trying to understand how these stories resonated then and how they might still speak to us today.
So speaking of conversations, what about those user reviews? Anything in there that really jumped out at you? Any opinions you particularly agreed or disagreed with?
It was interesting to see the range of reactions to Macaulay Culkin's performance.
Oh, yeah. He's definitely a divisive figure.
Yeah, some viewers found him incredibly endearing, while others just, thought he was grating and over the top.
You either love him as Kevin or you find him completely annoying.
It seems that way.
But I think that's kind of what makes it so memorable, right? You don't forget a face like that.
That's true, especially with those, exaggerated expressions.
It's iconic. And it makes you wonder, would a modern-day Home Alone even work with a child actor as the lead?
Interesting question.
Or would it need to be more ensemble-driven, with a group of kids, maybe?
Yeah, I mean, it would depend on how you approach the story. If you're going for that classic Home Alone vibe, with the emphasis on one kid's ingenuity and resourcefulness, then yeah, you probably still need a strong child actor at the center.
Right, someone to really carry that.
But if you're updating the concept, maybe focusing on a group of friends who find themselves in a similar predicament.
Right, like a whole crew.
Then that ensemble approach could be really interesting.
Yeah. You could explore those group dynamics, especially in a high-stakes situation.
For sure. You could have, the tech-savvy kid, the planner, the daredevil.
Each with their own, special skill set.
Exactly. Bringing their own unique strengths to the table.
It's making me think of those classic '80s adventure movies, like, The Goonies or Stand By Me,
Oh, yeah, great examples.
where you had these groups of kids going on these crazy adventures.
Facing their fears together.
Maybe there's a way to kind of tap into that spirit with a modern Home Alone.
It would definitely be a different kind of movie.
It would, but I think it could be really compelling.
As long as you find that balance
Yeah. Yeah.
between the humor and the heart, the action and the emotion.
Exactly. And you'd still have to capture that, that sense of childhood wonder.
That feeling of being on the cusp of something, big and unknown.
Right, right.
But you also need to ground it in relatable characters and genuine emotional stakes.
Mm.
Oh, and of course you can't forget the booby traps.
The booby traps are essential.
They're a must.
But how would you even reimagine those for a modern audience? We talk about the digital angle, but what about the physical ones? What would today's Kevin rig up?
Well, I think you could still play around with everyday objects,
Yeah.
but with a bit of a tech twist.
Yeah.
So instead of paint cans, maybe it's a drone rigged with silly string or glitter bombs,
I love that.
or a 3D printer that creates, a series of obstacles and diversions.
Huh. Or what about, like, a Roomba that's been hacked to chase the intruders?
Oh, that's great. Like a weaponized robot vacuum.
You wouldn't even suspect it until it's too late. It's amazing how one simple premise can spark so many creative possibilities.
It is.
But at the end of the day, I think what's really at the heart of Home Alone, what makes it resonate, is that sense of empowerment.
Yeah, that idea of a child, finding their strength and resourcefulness.
Overcoming the odds.
It's a powerful message, especially for younger viewers.
So what's the one takeaway you hope our listener gets from this deep dive into Home Alone? What do you want them to walk away with?
I think it's this. Home Alone's a movie that invites us to embrace the joy of silliness,
Yeah.
to tap into that childlike sense of wonder,
That sense of playfulness.
and to remember that even in the most chaotic situations, we can find humor and heart and even a little bit of magic.
Beautifully said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into Home Alone. But we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts on this holiday classic? Did this conversation change your perspective at all? And if you were to design a modern-day version, what kind of booby traps would you dream up? Let us know.